Sorry about that, the last video got interrupted. So, where we left off is we're talking about correlation coefficient visual representations. So, basically what this is these are the different correlation coefficients and some graphs you might see with them. So like this graph, for example, if you have a 1 or a -1 as your correlation coefficient, that means your graph is in an exactly straight line. Okay, so a strong positive correlation means this is in an exactly straight line here. And that is a correlation coefficient of 1. We go to point 8. This says moderate, but this is really just a strong as well. As far as Algebra 1 goes, we'll just talk about those 4 different types. Strong positive, strong negative, weak positive, weak negative. So point 8, as you can see, there's still a very obvious direction this is going. They're not in a straight line, but it's still the direction is very obviously going in a positive direction. So that's another strong positive. Point 3, now we're moving into the weak positive because as you can see, this is much more spread out. And it's not near as obvious that this is going in a positive direction. It is, but it's not near as obvious as that one. So the more spread out it is, the weaker it is. This is no correlation. If it's not any direction at all, positive or negative, it's no correlation or no relationship. Now going into the negative, we have a weak negative, because again, this is very spread out, but it is going in that negative direction barely. And as you get closer to -1, those scatter plot points are getting closer together. So negative 0.8 is another strong negative correlation because it's closer together, moving that way. And then lastly, since it's -1, that means it's a direct straight line. So it's obviously a negative that is very strong as well. So let's look at some examples of these because they'll also give you, they might just give you the correlation coefficient and then ask you if it's strong, if it's weak, positive, negative, that type of stuff. So here they give us 4 and they ask us to tell whether each would be a strong or weak correlation coefficient. So part A, -0.913. On that one, again, this is going back to the couple slides ago. You have to tell, first of all, it's a negative number. So then you have to say, is this closer to -1 or 0 to figure out if it is strong or weak. So -0.9 is much closer to -1. So since it's closer to -1, that means you have a strong correlation coefficient. So it's closer to -1 or 1, it's strong. If it's closer to 0, it's weak. So next one, we have positive 0.246. So that's positive, so is it closer to 0 or 1? Since it starts 0.2, that is much closer to 0. So part B would be a weak correlation coefficient. Part C, -0.135. That is much you think closer to -1 or 0. That is much closer to 0, so that is also a weak correlation coefficient. And then lastly, we have 0.879. Is that closer to 0 or 1? That is much closer to 1, so that means that is a strong correlation coefficient. So that covers 4.4. Main things to remember. How to read a scatter plot and what a scatter plot is. Give me 1 second. What a scatter plot is as far as it's a bunch of different points covering data from 2 different sets of data. You have your X data and your Y data that go together. 4 types of relationships for scatter plots. 3 main ones: positive linear relationship, negative linear relationship, no relationship, and then also you might see quadratic relationships sometimes. And then lastly, you need to be able to know what correlation coefficient is and how it's used. As far as if it's closer to -1 or 1, you have a strong, and if it's closer to 0, you have a weak. Thanks.